Would now like to turn over this presentation to our speaker, Mark. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So today we're going to go through decoding generative AI and really get into what generative AI is and what makes it so special. We'll get into the convergence of AI and business and really look at how AI and generative AI specifically is transforming businesses and the industry at large. And then we'll look at how Insight looks at generative AI and looks at strategies for better adoption. We'll take a look at some industry use cases and then figuring out where Insight can start and help you leverage generative AI in your businesses. So my name is Mark Candelora. I'm a senior services manager in our portfolio team aligned with Modern Applications. So again, we're going to start to look at what is generative AI and what makes it so special. So first, we want to set the stage and take a look at where generative AI and where the term kind of fits into artificial intelligence overall, and how the evolution of artificial intelligence really got us to this point where now we have this democratized AI tool that can be used for a really broad set of use cases. So at the outermost layer here, we have artificial intelligence, and that's really the kind of the broadest term that we use for any kind of automated decision making, where we want to leverage computers and digital technologies to try to help drive and make decisions in an automated fashion. Some examples of this may be things like computerized opponents in chess, or other kinds of automated decision making that you might see in other applications where it's really rules based, right? And so the process here will, the artificial intelligence will execute a set of tasks and ultimately take some input and output some decision or some action. Machine learning is a more specialized application of artificial intelligence that really leverages data to influence the way that the outcomes happen through this machine learning process. So we take these algorithms and we train them against a set of data, and then we test the outcomes of that machine learning model against another set of data. And so that's where we're really taking these algorithms and helping them learn through existing data. Deep learning is a more refined version of that using neural networks. And so I'll save the explanation of all that process for later. But really, the best application that we've seen of that so far is in this generative AI space, where generative AI is the use of those neural networks for the creation of new content. So when we look at what generative AI is, we've all heard of GPT, ChatGPT, GPT-4, right? And what is this, right? So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. The most recent version of I think the most popular model that we've all heard of is GPT-4, and that was trained on a petabyte of data. And it was the way that they did that was using self-learning models, where it does not require any kind of human interaction to train the model against this amount of data. And the way that they do that is through a number of different types of training models, some of them called reductive training, where it will take large amounts of text, maybe from books or from other sources on the web, blank out certain words, and then have the model predict what that word should be based on the context, the data around it. And so through this fashion, you can imagine how the GPT models are really kind of predictive in nature, right? So all they're really doing is taking some input and predicting what a valid output should be through probability, essentially, right? And they do this millions of times over and over again to ultimately come out and spit out a result that is meaningful to the user. So the GPT models use a transformer architecture, which is really revolutionary in the way that it was implemented. It allows these GPT and generative AI models to become much more effective in terms of the way the outputs that they're able to produce, as well as the way that they're trained. And so GPT models really excel at tasks that require access to large amounts of data, and they can analyze really large amounts of data and summarize that data really effectively. And it just makes them really generally useful in a lot of different situations. Now, generative AI is seen. There's a lot of hopes for it, right? People are looking at generative AI and all the things that it can do, and seeing how approachable it is by people that don't have a lot of capabilities. Either they're not data scientists, they're not developers, and suddenly they can start to use this generative AI model and get real outcomes from it, from a very generic tool, right? And so a lot of what we're seeing today is, in the industry, is that organizational leaders are really hoping that they can make real inroads in increasing their productivity of their teammates, assisting with research and development, and generally speaking, automating and augmenting people, their employees, in the way that they do work. And so one of the things that we're looking at today in terms of the process or the maturity model for how this impact will sort of evolve over time is this sort of three-stage model, where today what we're seeing is these kind of general purpose applications where, for example, we have ChatGPT. It is a text and language-based model, right? And we're seeing that it's really approachable, again, by just about everybody. And so in order to make really good use of that model, what we're seeing is that there's a rise in something called prompt engineering, right? And so actually, it is more approachable because it uses regular language to be able to interact with it, something that we all speak English, and so we can all communicate. But the reality is that the human language is imperfect in terms of the words that I'm using to communicate with you today are largely effective because of the context that comes along with it, right? So in order to understand the sentences that I'm using right now, you needed to be here in attendance 5 minutes ago when we were just going through the introduction, and now you know the context of what we're talking about and why I'm talking about this general purpose stage. And so this has led to the rise in something called prompt engineering, where individuals are trained even more so on using the English language to improve the output of these general purpose models, generative AI, right? And so so what we're seeing is that we're still kind of in this first phase of development, where this early stage of development, where it can be somewhat challenging actually to implement these tools and make them work for you, right? So we're seeing that the expectations are ease of implementation, the kind of tool-based efficiency and lower cost, because it's helping augment our teammates. And the reality is that it can be actually somewhat more challenging to implement. We see not the outcomes are not as great as what we expect. But the reality is that this is the perfect place where organizations need to start to adopt these tools and understand where some of the pitfalls are and stay ahead of their competition, right? And so the next stage here that we see is specialization, and this is really where the tools become more specialized, obviously, but in the way that they do that, it is not necessarily in that they're specialized at specific business tasks, like we have certain models that are better at in the medical field, or some other ones that are better at development. It's actually more in the domain of the AI application itself. So what we end up seeing is that these specialized models, we might have kind of a better competition and a larger array of tools out there, where we might be augmenting our AI workflow with different types of tools to produce more effective outcomes, right? And here, a lot of the challenge is that these AIs and these kinds of tools tend to be kind of left up to the developers to implement, to orchestrate the process between the output of one AI and the input of the next AI, that kind of thing. So a lot of the challenge here again just becomes that each of these, as we're going through and implementing this, the complexity is left to our developers who, they've already got a lot going on, and they're needing to solve for a lot of challenges through this whole process, and a lot of those learnings are on them in order to elevate and make relevant, solve these challenges for the organization. So that really poses challenges with the delivery times and consistent outcomes, right? And so the third stage that we see here, and this is likely still several years out in terms of the way that the tools are evolving and our understanding of how AI will be used in the future. But this kind of standardization process where and it's less about the tools at this point, and it's more about the understanding of how to make those tools effective within the organization. And so the benefits that we really see here are that the entire organization starts to transform around these technologies, right? And so we've seen that with the cloud 10 years ago, and we're seeing that today with generative AI, where now we need to really transform our business in order to take the most the most effective use of these tools, right? And so we start to we start to see this kind of evolution from cost reduction to increased value and value delivery, right? And so as we start to move into the standardization phase, we start to really see how the value of these technologies can really drive a highly increased competitive advantage in the organizations that are successful at doing this. So now we're going to look at pivoting to how AI and business come together and how AI will be transforming business overall. So I'm not going to drain the slide, but really organizational leaders are looking to use generative AI to drive outcomes for their business, right? So some of these outcomes are pretty common and standard, right? Increased productivity, lower cost overall. But we're starting to see some of these other objectives creeping in here. So with better employee experience, better customer experience, right? And so a lot of these things are really looking at accelerating the value to the rest of the organization. People love when they don't have to. There's reduced toil. They get to do more of what they love. Customers like it when we're able to solve their problems much faster with better consistency. And so really these two areas here are a little bit newer, in some of the impacts that we like to see in some of these newer technology versus some of the technologies that we've seen in the past. So there's really clear areas where generative AI excels, right? So access to massive amounts of data, better, faster decision making, and really increased delivery of, increased time to market and delivery of value into the market, right? So some of the use cases that we're looking at for AI to really help accelerate is, in software development for one. So today we have these tools leveraging generative AI where we have automated code completion. You can see, the code is being after the prompt is being automatically completed based on the overall context of where the developer is in their application. We have other tools you can see here on the slide on the lower left here. This is actually a tool that Insight has created from GPT models, and we've and it's automatically generating whole blocks of code based on a prompt, based on an input. And so that's what we have today. And so that, we're seeing some increases in productivity for developers today, but, accelerating into the future, and this is down the road, right? We're not here yet, but we're looking at potentially where, generative AI applications will be able to actually generate entire applications for us. And this will likely based on, a significant amount of input, right? Now, this input today, we have developers that are writing code, right? And code is a very exact language. It's moving bits and bytes, combining strings, doing arithmetic, and developers will no longer be doing that kind of thing in the future, right? They're going to be writing higher level statements that are much more in terms of outcomes. We can look through those documents that are created, and us as as users, as business users or just technologists will be able to inherently understand really what we're trying to accomplish just through just through these kinds of documentation. So we can see here, a developer is writing in what we call Gherkin language, which is really just kind of a given X when this happens, then outcome. And so that's a very sort of plain language way of describing how we want a certain behavior to happen. And through that, other teammates who might be security focused will be also generating, having their input into the application. And overall, what the output is going to look like is a compiled application. And now you can imagine how this may dramatically accelerate the development of our applications, where we're no longer spending 2 weeks on a given feature. It may take us a day to augment an existing application with a new feature. And some of the benefits are, in terms of the documentation, the inputs that our generative application compiler might take in, that is much more understandable and human readable for our business users. And then, clearly, faster time to market, improved quality, and really increased value for our organization, because we're going to be able to stay ahead of our competition and be able to get the new features out into the market faster, more effectively, with better security. Right? So in terms of the medical research world, you can imagine how this might, transform drug discovery overall, right? So today, drug discovery, the way that, and no, I'm not a drug researcher. This this is a very deep topic here. But one of the ways that drugs work is that they interact with different proteins and different enzymes in different ways, and the shape of those enzymes and proteins is really important to how the drug will interact with them, right? So today we use machine learning and artificial intelligence to accelerate that. We can tell the shape of these proteins, and we're able to then effectively create drug molecules that will interact with these proteins in a hopefully in an effective way, and very deterministic way in each individual person. Now, we do know, however, that each individual person is different, right? Their genetics are different. The way that they produce these kinds of proteins may be very different. And so in the future, and again, this is in the distant future, you can see that the understanding of individual drug targets may no longer be needed, right? We may be able to accelerate the development of drugs for each individual person through this kind of artificial intelligence and generative AI work, right? And so you can take genomic data, you can take the diagnostic data that you might get from X-rays or from other kinds of lab tests, and put it through this medical analysis, automated analysis engine, and be able to come up with personalized drug therapies, right? And so this is really the dream of where the medical industry is going to be going. Now, this is not a new thing at all. It's been in the world for probably about a decade or more now. But this is really generative AI. The advancement of generative AI is really driving this forward, and really kind of enabling how people to really see this as a potential future outcome. So one of the things that I do want to touch on here is where generative AI is not a good tool for the kind of use case, right? And so the way that I want to go through this is, looking at the difference between, intelligence and wisdom. And so intelligence, is generally described as like access to knowledge, right? How much you know. And generative AI knows almost an infinite amount of information. It was trained on almost a petabyte of data, maybe the culmination of all human knowledge, or at least digital knowledge today. And so it has a lot of intelligence, but wisdom is knowing how best to use that intelligence. And generative AI and all machine learning has almost no wisdom, right? It's kind of the equivalent of a toddler who knows everything that there is to know about anything, but doesn't have the experience or the wisdom to understand what is appropriate, what is the most effective way to solve a certain challenge, that kind of thing. And so, in the way that we look at this, we always need to have some human interacting or interpreting the output of a generative AI for it to be most effective. And so there are certain places where where that is most most relevant, and those things are things like interpersonal relations. Anytime where one person is talking to another, that's really hard to just completely replace with a machine, with generative AI or any kind of tool, really. Any kind of complex problem solving where the outcome may not necessarily be evident based on the inputs, right? And so we need to make sure that similar to the use case I just went over with development, it still takes a lot of effort for developers to create an application, because the outcome, a single problem statement isn't necessarily enough to create an entire application. It still takes people and humans to create that through lots of iterative development, through trial and error, through learning ultimately, right? And so that kind of output is really hard for any kind of machine learning or artificial intelligence to be able to get to, right? And then the ethical problems as well. So computers are just that. They follow a set of instructions, and they will do that over and over again without any kind of understanding of the problems the downstream problems that might cause. And so clearly generative AI is not really should not be used to analyze or solve ethical problems in this way, and often can actually ethical problems can arise through the indiscriminate use of AI where it shouldn't be used. So here we're going to start to look at how Insight leverages machine learning and generative AI for increased value and success. And so one of the examples that we'll go through here is in a bike retailer. Now, we actually have a demo that's based on this, where we can look at as a bike retailer in an e-commerce running an e-commerce platform, we can analyze our customers' purchase data. We can analyze our current inventory, any trends and demographics of our customer base, and in the industry at large, and be able to create a consumable output for maybe a CEO of that company or somebody that's running a marketing campaign. Use that AI to go back and forth and brainstorm ideas. And AI is really powerful in this area, where you can use generative AI to get a list of ideas, and often those ideas independently, each one of those ideas may be a terrible idea. And this is really where a human is best to work with these sorts of tools, because you can take 2-3 of those tools or of those ideas in the brainstorming session and combine them together to create some really innovative, powerful ideas that then you might take forward into your product, right? So then you can look at augmenting the product lifecycle through through better testing, writing of code, and really look to help deliver your product faster, right? You can use it to create marketing collateral and identify new customer segments that you may want to target based on the inventory that you have, or based on the marketing collateral that might speak really effectively to that audience. And so if we look at across a lot of different departments within an organization, you can see all these different use cases where generative AI might be of use. So looking at the finance row, right, we have this fraud detection where, again, generative AI is really good at swallowing up and consuming and then analyzing massive amounts of data. So fraud detection is a natural place where generative AI can really provide a lot of value. Similarly with risk analysis, right? Generative AI is able to really help sort of fill in the gaps for your risk planning and make sure that you have all your bases covered. Financial statements, clearly, it's able to summarize information really well and provide it with, existing financial statements to be able to show what the output format should look like. It can take financial data and create something really quickly and effectively that would reproduce those existing financial statements or those past financial statements. And finally here, the more forward looking, be able to create some investment strategies, which again is not something that you're going to want to execute on right away. It's something that requires a lot of cycles with a person to be able to say, tell me more about this strategy, about this tactic that you're recommending. And generative AI will go through and cycle through and give you more detail on maybe why that's a good strategy, or it'll give you some reverse logic and say, why shouldn't I do this? Maybe why might I want to go in another direction? And it helps to really create that kind of sounding board for your ideas and really help to drive really rapid ideation around the creation of, in this example, an investment strategy. So generative AI, and we've talked about this a fair amount now, and so I'll try to be short here, but is really one of the major concerns that a lot of leaders have is that people will become too dependent on generative AI. And so it's really going to require really some careful thought into how we make sure that people don't get lazy, right? And how people can really use generative AI and these new tools to still stay effective, but not reduce toil and really elevate the delivery of value for their organization, right? And so on the right hand side here, some tips on how to use generative AI effectively. We talked about prompt engineering and the kind of training that might be required there, really being effective and specific with the prompts that you're giving generative AI. Again, it doesn't have the context that's needed to be to produce really good output. So you need to provide it with that kind of context. You need to make sure that you're not opening yourself up to bias in terms of either the existing data that you have or in terms of the outputs that generative AI might be providing, right? So again, generative AI is really good at outputting giving you outputs based on the past data that it's already received. And so so any kind of bias in that existing data will be almost accentuated in the outputs that it's giving you. Make sure that anytime you're using generative AI, that you're calling it out, and so that you're not potentially plagiarizing or using other sources without calling that out and making it taking credit for that, and making sure that anytime that you have generative AI based content, that you have a set of workflows where that content is getting approved. Again, that helps to reduce risk around plagiarism, around potential biases and discrimination that might exist, that might be inherent in that data. And it also helps to potentially reduce the risk, hopefully reduce the risk of the kinds of hallucinations that we've seen crop up in news stories and whatnot in the past. And so making sure that you have really tight controls over the output before some of those things, some of that output is then used in in marketing material or anything that maybe have a significant impact if bad things were to come out through that output. And then encourage people to use generative AI and be safe with it, right? So making sure that they are they're using it regularly, that they understand how to be most effective in terms of their day-to-day, and that as they discover new ways of working with generative AI, that they're able to surface that up and make the rest of their team more effective. So here we're going to look at a couple of different use cases where Insight has helped our customers in the past, not necessarily with generative AI. It's still relatively new, but with other kinds of AI and machine learning use cases where we've been able to build that into existing applications or other use cases that have helped deliver some significant results. So in this case, Steward Healthcare, we've worked with in the past. We developed an entire app suite for them where we were helping them manage their patient workflows and really accelerating the amount of time, reducing the amount of time that individual patients were staying in the hospital. Again, the longer stay in hospital means likely that that person may get sick from other patients, or are just generally causing additional costs to hospitals and to insurance providers to need to pay for that. And so in this case, the hospital was able to reduce the hospital system was able to reduce the amount of stay for the length of stay for individual patients by almost a day and a half. And we did that through the application of a set workflow for patients, highlighting that and surfacing that to nurses that were managing the patient's stay, and then ultimately reflecting that down the road to the people that are doing staffing. And so they were able to then effectively, schedule nurses, 2 weeks out for the amount of predicted stay for their patients. And actually, it really helped dramatically reduce cost. They were this was a manual process for them before, and now they were able to effectively, dramatically reduce the, their wasted scheduled nurses and things like that, where they overscheduled in a certain department based on their contractual needs for staffing levels, for staffing ratios for individual patients. So the Vivly is another use case here in the medical industry, where Vivly is a company that is helps to connect pharma researchers with with people that are, with organizations that have gone through clinical trial data, and to really get access to that data to help accelerate drug development and drug discovery. And so Insight partnered with Vivly to help build an entire platform where individual researchers were able to, or researchers as part of organizations or universities, were able to request access to this clinical data. And that data, that workflow was brokered within the Vivly system. There was a back and forth exchange of required information and and approvals and things like that. And once the access was provided, then the research environment was provisioned, a secure research environment was provisioned with all the data analysis tools that were required for those researchers to then accelerate discovery of new trends and things like that, with application to from drug to treatment data. So this last example here is a tech manufacturer. They have over 100,000 different parts that they produced, and they were different lines of products that they had that some of them would work together and were compatible, and some of them weren't. And it was really hard for their sales teams to understand, and required a lot of training for those teams to understand which products were compatible and which ones would work together. And based on a certain set of parts that that a customer was purchasing, they might have a certain application or a certain reason that they were buying that. And so their sales teams were having a hard time being able to recommend other parts that customer might want to buy based on what they were buying today. And so Insight was able to help to standardize their data collection and build a modern data warehouse through our Lens modern data warehouse. And we were then able to take that data and produce a machine learning model that would provide recommendations to their sales teams and their customers through their CRM system. And you can see that the outcomes here were significant. So after just a few weeks, their revenue dramatically increased, their projected revenue and pipeline, and taken through the end of the year was a really significant win. So looking at different ways that we're going to be that we can help, that Insight can help work with generative AI. So the first, life cycle here that we want to work through is, a lot of people are familiar with machine learning life cycles. And so what we want to look at here is generative AI life cycle, and how do I get to use generative AI to solve the kinds of problems that we have, right? And so it starts really with, what are the goals? What are we trying to what are the problems that we're trying to solve, and what are we trying to get to? And from there, we can start to look at, what kind of model selection we want to use. Do we want to use regular machine learning, or do we want to go with generative AI? And then what kind of information do we have? And so we can, because generative AI is already, it's pre-trained, and we can start to add data into it. We can look at what the outputs that it's giving us today are, right? And then understand, okay, based on what I'm seeing today, what other kinds of information can I add into this model to be able to then improve the results? And so then from there, we start to look at, okay, now do we get into the large language model augmentation, tuning, training? And so we're not going to get into all the pros and cons over which to choose and why. And there's a lot of the selection there gets very deep, but ultimately we want to understand, we want to bring in the right tools and the right process for how we're going to be tuning that model to give us the output that we need. So from there, we're starting to look at, how do we best structure the data for the large language model, make sure that we're training the model effectively, and then what does the engineering approach look like, and how do we deliver that model effectively? So getting into the CI/CD pipelines, and how do we deploy the model with consistency, and then once we do that, we need to be able to test it. So looking at the outcomes and understanding, is the output matching what we expect initially? Is it meeting our goals? And then ultimately, is it viable for our business to use, right? Is the process that we just went through, cost effective? If we needed to go through another couple of cycles of training, augmentation, and deployment, is that going to be cost effective for our business based on the effectiveness of what we're seeing here? And then ultimately, we're continuing to iterate and improve that. And is that each time, is that model providing the kinds of value that we expected based on the way that the industry is transforming? So that leads us to our engagement model, and how we might move forward with a process where we're looking to help deliver these kinds of tools and transformation into the organization. So align where we're going to understand that kind of business centric, what are the outcomes that we're looking for, and we're looking to kind of envision what that process might look like, how we're going to be taking this business problem and then aligning a solution to it. And so then we can accelerate, and this is really where we bring in some of our accelerators, our fast starts, and be able to really create the initial solution and really validate that in an effective way, right? Very cost effective way. After that, we're looking at the kind of enterprise-wide transformation, where we're really looking at scaling that out and augmenting our teams with much larger, more cost-effective engagement model, and then looking at how we're going to be governing that over the years, right? And so we want to make sure that our process is measured and remains cost-effective throughout the entire life cycle. So why Insight, right? So Insight has a really broad and really deep set of expertise. We bring unparalleled partnerships, and we have the IP and accelerators that make us the most cost-effective means of getting started here. And so you can see here, a lot of what we've been talking about today has been in the realm of modern apps and data and AI, but we really have a very broad set of expertise across infrastructure, modern workplace, and edge development, as well as managed services, lifecycle services. And so you can see the breadth of the work that we've done, our history here, and we're really effective at at delivering these kinds of outcomes to our customers. And so please take the next step of your journey, scan the QR code, and get started with us today. Thank you.